A, wo- a woman who vowed to be a Nazira and drank wine or rendered herself tummy from the dead, she receives 40 lashes. If her husband revoked her Naziris, but she did not know that her husband had revoked her Naziris, and she drank wine or rendered herself tummy from the dead, she does not receive 40 lashes. But Yehuda says, even if she does not receive 40 lashes, she receives lashes for rebelliousness. A woman who vowed to be a Nazira and set aside her animal, and then her husband revoked a Naziris, if her animal was his, he may go out and pasture with the flock. If her animal was hers, the sin offering dies, the burnt offering is offered as a burnt offering, and the peace offering is offered as a peace offering. But it is eaten for one day and does not require bread. If she had unspecified funds, they go for voluntary offerings. Specified funds, the money is for a sin offering. No, I'm sorry. The money for the sin offering goes to the Dead Sea, and one might not benefit from it, but the rules governing the misuse of sacred items do not apply to it. With the money for the burnt offering, they bring a burnt offering, and the rules governing the misuse of sacred items apply. With the money for the peace offering, they bring a peace offering, and it is eaten for one day and does not require bread. If one of the bloods was thrown on her behalf, it cannot revoke. Rabbi Akiva says, even if one of all the animals was slaughtered on her behalf, he cannot revoke. In what context are these things said? Concerning the head shaving in Tahara, but in the case of head shaving for Tuma, he may revoke, since he may say, I do not want an impoverished woman. Rebbe says, even concerning the head shaving in Tahara, he may revoke, since he may say, I do not want a shorn woman. Okay.
Hey. All right. Now, we introduce a new concept now in Mishnah Bab, is the concept of a man declaring a Naziris on his son. This is something that actually is completely halacha l'mashmi Sinai. It's not written anywhere in the Torah that you can do this, but there's an oral tradition that a man can do this. Okay, and it's binding min Torah. That's what halacha l'mashmi Sinai means. Okay. However, as we'll see in the Mishnah, this is something that only the father can do, and not his mother. And furthermore, it can only be binding if everyone in his life consents. Everyone in his life being his mother and his siblings. Okay, because this is also baked into the halacha, is that they also have the right to object and to prevent this to prevent the son from becoming a Nazir, including of course the son himself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now this is the Mishnah says Ha'ish Madiris Benova Nazir. A man can declare a Naziris vow on his son. But in Ha'isham Madiris is Benova Nazir. But a woman cannot make her son into a Nazir. Kate said, how does this work? Gilach, Oshe Gilchuhu Krovav. What if the son shaves himself? If he hears his father proclaiming him to be a Nazir and he goes and cuts his hair immediately, or one of his relatives goes and cuts his hair, right? They don't even have to say anything, but because that simple act is a demonstration of defiance and says, we're not accepting this, I'm not accepting this Naziris. Okay? Micha, if he explicitly protested, or Shemichu Kravav, or one of his family members objected. Now the case, so having happened, so if the father, so the case is where the father has declared his son to be a Nazir, and the son or one of his relatives in some way has objected to this and nullified the Naziris. So this is actually halachically the equivalent of a husband annulling his wife's Naziris. Because what happens? Let's say the father had already set aside some animals. He put them aside and said, "Okay, these are going to be my son's behemoths when he completes his Naziris." If he's got an animal set aside, once again, the same halachas as we saw in the previous cases, chatas must be left to die. You bring the ola as an ola, right? So the same halacha as we saw before, it must be eaten within one day, but you don't have to bring bread. What happens if he'd set aside money for the korbanos, but he hadn't designated what the money was for? It must all go to the nadava box. Maus Meforshim, however, if it's specified it, the Mei Chatas, then the money from the Chatas, Yelchul Yam HaMelech, goes to the Dead Sea, Lo Nerlin, V'lo Morin. You cannot benefit from it, but there's no din of Me'ila either. The Mei Ola, Yaviu Ola, the money for the Ola must be used to bring in Ola, or Morin Bahin, and there is a din of Me'ila on it. The Mei Shlamim, Yaviu Shlamim, and the money for Shlamim must be used to bring Shlamim, V'nechalim, L'yom Echad, V'einan Tu'nim Lechem, and again, must be eaten within one day, and does not require bread. Ha'ish.
Didn't Chana declare her son a Nazir?
Yes. Chana, but that was, first of all, that was yeah, actually it's a good point. Like the mother, okay, first of all, he hadn't even been conceived yet.
If I have a son.
So it hadn't been conceived, and clearly she had Elkanah's buy-in to this story. So probably what happened was, in order to ratify this, I mean, it doesn't, the Torah doesn't tell us what were the technicalities that happened over here, but Shmuel did keep his Naziris, and therefore, so possibly what happened there is that Elkanah said, okay, my son is a Nazir is a Nazir Olamis.
Okay.
So he's a Nazir Olam, and he will always be so he's a permanent Nazir. Remember, the permanent Nazir is the one who's allowed to take a haircut once a year.
Right. Oh, okay. That's I could be a Nazir then. Okay.
Okay. Mishna Zayin. Ha'ish megalech al Nazirus Aviv. Here's another halacha Moshe Sinai. Okay, not specified anywhere in the Torah, but there's a special dispensation for a man to use his father's Nazirus offerings for himself under certain circumstances. But a woman cannot use her father's Nazir offerings for herself, even if she is the Yoreshes, like she has no brothers. Okay, how does this work? Ketzad. Aviv Nazir. So his father was a Nazir. And he set aside money for his korbanos for when he finished his Nazirus term. But then he died before he could finish his Nazirus. So Amar, and the son comes and says, Hareini Nazir al Menashe Agalech al Maos Abba. And he says, okay, so he's deeply moved by his father, by his father's passing. And he says, I'm going to do what my father did. I'm going to be a Nazir, and I'm going to bring his Nazirus offerings as my Nazirus offerings, as like Eloi Nishmaso, whatever his reasoning is. So he wants to use his father's offerings for himself. Amar Rabbi Yossi, Harei Elu Yiplu Lindava. This money must go to the Nadava box. He cannot use this for his own korban. So okay, that's not Ein Ze Megalech al Nazirus Aviv. This is not the case where the son can shave on his using his father's korbanos. That his father set it aside for himself, and it can't now suddenly devolve onto the son. So what is the case where he can do it? Only if he and his father were both Nazirim at the same time. And while they were Nazirim at the same time, the father set aside money for his own Nazirus, and then he died. So this is a case where he can shave on using his father's money, because as his father dies, the money the Yerusha immediately falls to him, and it maintains Ki'ilu, its sanctity. Because if you take a look at a snapshot in the timeline as this is happening, in the first case where only the father was a Nazir, the moment the father dies, bam, the korbanos have got nobody to fall to, right? The money that was set aside for korbanos has got nobody to fall to. It automatically belongs to Nadava. Okay. Whereas in the case where the father and son are both Nazirim, the moment the father dies, the Yerusha laws automatically push the money that was set aside for the Nazirus onto the son. and falls onto him, and because he's the one since he's also Nazir and he can also bring korbanos, so that's the case where he is allowed to use that money to bring his own korbanos. Okay, this only works for father to son. Halacha l'moshe Sinai, that it doesn't work for a daughter, even if the daughter is a yoreshes. Okay. Now, just a footnote over here that Kahati brings is that the Rabbanan disagree with Rabbi Yossi, and they hold it doesn't matter whether he made the Naziris before the father's death or after the father's death, on condition that he could use that money. It's fine. It doesn't. So Rabbi Yossi is more machmir over here, but the Chachamim say that it doesn't matter what order happens. That if he inherits the money from his father for the Naziris, then he can do what I said before, that he can become a Nazir in place of his father and use that money for his own korbanos. And the halacha actually follows the Chachamim. Okay. Fine. Perik Hey. Beis Shammai Omrim. I think we should be familiar with this. I think we learned this halacha before. Was it? Did we learn this in the Dime? No, that's too recent. That we would have remembered that, right? Beis Shammai Omrim Hekdesh Taos Hekdesh Ubeis Hillel Omrim Eno Hekdesh. Beis Shammai say even if you erroneously declare something to be Hekdesh, the Hekdesh is nonetheless binding. Ubeis Hillel Omrim Eno Hekdesh, and Beis Hillel say no, it's not. It's not binding. Okay, so what's the case of this? Amar, the guy says, Shor Shachor Sheyetze Mibeisi Rishon Harehu Hekdesh. He says, the black ox that comes out of my house first to greet me will be Hekdesh. Okay. He's expecting the behavior, because behaviorally he notices that there's always one black ox that comes out to greet him when he comes home. And he's declaring that one, when it comes out, is going to be Hekdesh. And instead of that, the black ox is for shlofen and the white one comes out. So there's Yatza Lavan. Beis Shammai Omrim Hekdesh. He says, never mind. No, his intention was on the ox that was going to come out first, and therefore it is Hekdesh. And Beis Hillel say, forget it, ain't no Hekdesh. There's no Hekdesh over here. Okay, what's the reasoning that's going on behind Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai? Is that there is actually a halacha in Tamura. Right. So remember, Tamura is where you try and exchange an animal for something hekdesh, and the kedusha actually is tofes on both of them.
Okay, right.
So Tamura is really a dumb thing to try and do because it's it's aser and you get lashes, and B you're just going to create extra hekdesh. You can't actually do the swap.
Right.
But the din in Tamura is that even Beis Hillel concedes that in Tamura. Taos is also the erroneous Tamura Taos is still Tamura. So he makes a mistake. He points at this animal and says this is shlamim tachas the shlamim, and really it's an ola. Well, it still gets the, so it still transfers the kedusha onto the other one, even though he said it wrong. His intention was to transfer the hekdesh. So even Beis Hillel concedes that is actually tofes. So Beis Shammai say, look, we know that in Tamura it works, so why shouldn't it work with regular hekdesh? And Beis Hillel say, no, we don't accept that, because in the case of Tamura, you're transferring an existing hekdesh into something else. But here it's just like you're spreading it. That's easier to do than a new hekdesh, where you're declaring something that was completely chulin and now you're adding a hekdesh onto it. It can only work if you said it if it was done with full knowledge and full that everything should be the same. Okay, so that's the argument between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, and of course the halacha follows Beis Hillel that hekdesh taos and a hekdesh. Okay. Aleph Vav.
If one says, I am a Nazir from here until such and such a place, we calculate how many days journey it is from here until that place. If it's less than 30 days, he's a Nazir for 30 days. And if not, he is a Nazir for the number of days. If one says, I am a Nazir like the number of days of the solar year, he counts terms of Nazirus like the number of days of the solar year. Rabbi Yehuda says there was an incident, and when it included, he died. If one says, I am a Nazir from dried figs or pressed figs, Beis Shammai says he is a Nazir. Beis Hillel says he is not a Nazir. Rabbi Yehuda said even what Beis Shammai said, they did not say except for one who says they are for me a sacrifice. Right? Okay.
Hold on. Yeah, that's it. That's right.
Okay.
Nedarim base.
Declarations, Korban, I shall not eat of yours. Korban, if I shall eat of yours, and not a Korban, what I shall not eat of yours are not binding. The sukkah that I am constructing, the lulav that I am taking, the tefillin that I am wearing as the darim. These declarations are binding. As oaths, they are not binding. For one may not swear to transgress the commandments. And there is a nether within a nether, but there is not, there is not an oath within an oath. How? If he said, I am a Nazirite, if I eat, I am a Nazirite if I eat. And if he eats, he is bound by each declaration. Shavua that I shall not eat, Shavua that I shall not eat, and he ate, he is liable for only one. Okay. That's it, right?
No, one more. Stam is Nedarim.
Okay. Indeterminate Nedarim are treated stringently and their interpretation leniently. How? If he said, it is to me like assaulted meat or wine libations. If he vowed of heaven, it is binding. If he vowed of idols, it is not binding. If it is an indeterminate, it is binding, and it is to me like kerem. If he meant a kerem to the temple, it's binding, but if he meant a kerem to Kohanim, it is not binding. If it is an indeterminate, it is binding. If one said to me, it is to me like a tithe. If he vowed like the animal tithe, it is binding. If he vowed of the granary, it is not binding. If it is indeterminate, it is binding. To me, it is like truma. If he vowed concerning the withdrawal from the chamber, it is binding. If he vowed concerning the granary, it is not binding. If it is indeterminate, then that is binding. These are the words of Rav Meir. Rav Yehuda says indeterminate truma in Judea is forbidden, but in the Galilee is permitted, because people in the Galilee are not familiar with the withdrawals from the chamber. And indeterminate karayim in Judea, they are permissible, but in the Galilee, they are binding, because the people of the Galilee are not familiar with karayim of Kohanim.
Okay. Gimel Zayin.
Garments may not be rent, shoulders may not be bared, and a mourner's meal may not be served except by relatives of the deceased. And the mourner's meal is only served on a set-up bed. We may not bring food to the house of mourning, neither on a tray, nor on a salver, nor on a decorated basket, but only in plain baskets. We need not say the mourner's blessing is during Kol HaMoed, but we say in rows and off to consolation, and then they dismiss the public. We do not set down the bier in the street so as not to encourage eulogies. The biers of women are never set down out of respect. The women may sing dirges during Kol HaMoed, but may not clap. And the Rebbe Yishmael says those near the bier may clap. On Rosh Chodesh, Hanukkah, and Purim, they may sing dirges and clap on any of these days, but they may not engage in responsive wailing. Once the deceased is buried, they may neither sing dirges nor clap. And what is meant by dirges? That all meant is unison. And that what is meant by wailing, that one speaks and all others respond after her, as the verse states, and teach your daughters a lament, and each woman shall teach her neighbor a wailing. However, as regards the future, the verse states he will destroy death forever, and my Lord, Hashem Elohim, will wipe tears from upon every face. He will remove the shame of his people from the entire earth, for Hashem has spoken.
Tomorrow, Chagiga.
I'm going to go to Hagiga. There's one thing I'll read quickly to you, which we talked about today. I got from someone else that sent it to me. If I find it in a second, come on, real fast. Come on. It's about the let me. Come on, I want to get this. Okay, when I davened Mincha yesterday, somebody said to me when I left, isn't that person an Onan? His father died. And I said, I don't know who it is really, But he said, but he should be. So he sent a message to Rabbi Soloveitchik, and this was the answer. The person wrote, unless it was a case of mistaken identity, I was surprised to see this person at Mincha an hour ago. And Rabbi Soloveitchik wrote back, the body isn't Kutzal Oretz. The Pesach of most poskim in Eretz Yisrael is that until the body arrives here, the relatives do not practice aninus or avelus. Did you know that? I didn't.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. That's very interesting.
So, all right, put my other ones. Okay, we are now doing Orla.
Yeah.
Okay. We have base should. Condiments of 2 or 3 categories of one kind or of 3 are forbidden and combined. Reb Shimon says 2 or 3 categories of one kind or 2 kinds of one category do not combine. And if leaves of chulin or truma fell into dough, and neither this sufficed to leaven nor that sufficed to leaven, but together they leaven, Reb Eliezer says, I go after the last, and if we come and say whether the forbidden fell in first or last, it never reaches forbidden unless it suffices to leaven. Yosef Abira was one of the disciples of Beit Shammai, and he said, I asked Rabbi Gamliel the elder when he was standing in the eastern gate, and he said, it never renders forbidden unless it suffices to leaven. Okay.
Hey.
We have Para. Base Aleph. Eliezer says, a pregnant chatas cow is valid, but the sages invalidate. Reb Eliezer says it may not be purchased from idol worship, but the sages validate it. And not only this, but regarding all sacrificial offerings, both communal and individual, all sacrificial offerings may be brought from within the land and from outside the land from the new crop. And from the old, except for the omer and the 2 loaves, which may only come from the new crop and from the land. A cow whose horns or hooves are black, one should cut them off. The eyeball and the teeth and the tongues do not invalidate the cow, and the dwarf cow is valid. If it is a wart and one cut it off, Rabbi Yehuda validates the cow. Reb Shimon says any place that the wart was removed and did not give rise to red hair, in its place the cow is disqualified. And a cow born by cesarean section in the harlot's hire and the exchange for a dog, it is valid. Reb Eliezer validates it for invalid. Reb Eliezer validates it for it is stated, you shall not bring a harlot's hire or the exchange for a dog to the house of Hashem, your God, and this does not come into the house. All the blemishes which invalidate consecrated animals invalidate the cow, and if one rode on it, leaned on it, and hung it from the tail, and crossed the river with it, folded the rope on it, placed his cloak on it, it's invalidated. If one tied it with a rope, made a shoe for it so that it should not slip, spread his cloak on it, all in kind of the flies, it is valid. This is the rule. Anything done for the cow's need, it is valid, and for any other need, it's invalid.
Hey, Zvachim.
Aleph Gimel. A Pesach offering which was slaughtered on the morning of the 14th of Nisan for a designation other than its own, Rabbi Yehuda validates it as if it had been slaughtered on the 13th, but Ben Becerra invalidates it as if it had been slaughtered in the afternoon. Said Reb Shimon ben Azai, I have received a tradition from 72 Chachamim on the day that they appointed Reb Eliezer ben Azariah to the yeshiva, that all sacrifices that are eaten which were slaughtered for a designation other than their own are valid, but they are not credited to the owner as fulfillment of the obligation except for the Pesach and Kantas offering. And Azai added only the Ola offering, and the Chachamim did not concur with him. If one slaughtered a Pesach offering and a Kantas offering for a designation other than their own, or he received their blood or conveyed it or threw it for a designation other than their own, or for the designation or for a designation other than their own, or for a designation other than their own as well as for their own designation, they are invalid. What is an example of for their own designation and for a designation other than their own? For a Pesach designation or a Slummon designation. What is the example of it for a designation other than their own as well as for their own designation? For a Slummon designation and for a Pesach designation. Where a sacrifice can be invalidated during any of 4 things: during slaughtering, reception of the blood, conveying to the altar, and throwing upon the altar. Reb Shimon invalidates in the case of conveying, for Reb Shimon used to say it's impossible to make an offering without slaughtering, receiving, or throwing the blood, but it is possible without conveying, because one can slaughter the offering at the side of the altar and throw the blood there. Rav Eliezer says, if one walks where he must walk, the intent invalidates, but if one walks where he need not walk, the intent does not validate. Okay, one more. Any sacrifice whose blood received from the non-Kohen or from an Onan or from a Tevel Yom or from one who lacks vestments, one who lacks atonement, one whose hands and feet have not been washed, and one who is uncircumcised, who is tummy, but one who is sitting or standing upon utensils or an animal or his colleague's feet, it is invalid. If one received the blood with his left hand, he invalidates it, but Reb Shimon validates. If it spilled on the floor and he gathered it up, it is invalid. If he applied it on the ramp opposite at the altar's base, or if he applied that which should be applied to the lower part of the altar above, a part of the altar above, or that which should be applied to the upper part below, or that which should be applied within the sanctuary on the outside, or that which should be applied on the outside within the sanctuary, it is invalid, but it bears no charas. Okay. Okay. Have a great day.
You too. Have a lovely day.
Thank you. And I will see you tomorrow, Mr. Shem. Thank you. Bye.